Uh, I've lived in this area for over 15 years, and I've definitely seen the high tide gradually creep farther into our backyard. When we moved here, the water didn't come up very far, but now it's up past our shed. It's probably come up about 4 feet from where it was before.
Hi, I'm Katie O'Hearn, and I'm currently standing in a retention pond landlocked by A1A Road in a residential area. This is currently classified as a wetland in St. Augustine, but this cannot be considered an active wetland because it does not provide the services one would. The goal of our research was to identify these active wetlands and determine how they've changed over time. There's very little information on these changes in our local area, so we thought we'd research it ourselves.
Hi, I'm Terrence Sovine. I'm standing in the middle of an active wetland, and these wetlands provide services not only for the community, but the ecosystems. They provide flood control, wave absorption, they are a habitat to many species, and they are a sponge for runoff pollution. We hypothesize that there has been a decrease in wetland area over the past 7 decades between 1960 and 2019. In order to test this hypothesis, we used GIS software, geospatial referencing, and aerial imagery data layers. We then were able to draw polygons over all the wetlands in the city limits for each decade. This process was extremely important. Our method for defining wetlands had to be consistent between every single map. There was a lot of in-depth comparisons that had to be made between decades. We are confident in our consistency and the results we have found.
Hi, I'm Reagan Swift, and where I'm standing right now would have been a wetland 30 years ago. So I would have been standing in water. Based on this issue with development and the fragmentation of wetlands, our years had different wetland numbers. So we took those wetlands and we clustered them based on areas, and that gave us 5 different sites to focus on. We then took the area from each 5 sites and put them into tables based on their decade. Thanks to Dr. Cow, we were able to see the declining trend for each of those 5 sites over time, as well as the total sum of wetland loss.
The results of the overall wetland area were definitively showing a declining trend. The average rate of decrease was approximately 2%, and the resulting loss in area was over 4.5 million square meters. This is roughly 14% of St. Augustine's overall wetland inventory from the 1960s. Most of the decades follow the regression line, but the 1990s show a drop in area of approximately 1.8 million square meters. And then this evens back out with the regression line in 2002. This could be due to the numerous initiatives Florida passed on affordable loans and home assistance programs in the 1980s. During this time, population was growing and development was rising. It then slowed around 1993 to 1995. This series of events could explain the large decrease in area and then that slight regrowth that brought it back up to the constant rate of decline.
Based on our small sample size, we were unable to run a rigorous regressional analysis, but we were able to see that downward trend in our wetlands in the local St. Augustine area. Site 4, where I'm standing at right now, is our area of focus. We saw the highest amount of developmental increase as well as the highest amount of wetland decrease in this area.
Shown here is a side-by-side comparison of site number 4 within all 7 of the decades. This shows 1960 through 2019, and those dates can be seen in the upper left-hand corner of the map segments. The wetland coverage in this area experienced a decrease of approximately 2 million square meters. This is the greatest total loss of all the wetland sites. Developmental increase can be seen in the aerial photography. The majority of the development and the wetland filling took place between the 1970s and the 1990s. Between those decades, there was a 91% decrease in Site 4's wetland inventory due to this rapid development. The graph for Site 4's wetland loss is very similar to that of the total area loss graph. We see the same definitive decreasing trend as well as a major drop in area during the 1990s that gradually moves back to the more constant decline at the regression line in 2002. Developmental increase is not the only reason why we are seeing a decline in our wetland inventory. Sea level rise also influences this declining trend in our wetland area. Based on information in the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment, sea level rise is negatively impacting our local wetlands. And this is because seawalls and building infrastructures have created a barrier inhibiting these wetlands from migrating inland. This confines the wetlands and makes them more susceptible to submersion as sea level increases. Shown in this figure are 3 sea level rise scenarios that show St. Augustine's flooding at 0 feet, 1.5 feet, and 2.5 feet above sea level. As these areas become more commonly flooded, wetland submersion will become more regular, causing great damage to the wetlands.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Daig. It's probably up on the screen right now, but I'm a business major with a minor in coastal environmental science, and welcome to the wetlands. So first, I'd like to start off with the topic of environmental economics. And you might ask, what is environmental economics? Well, environmental economics is the area of economics that deals with the financial impact of policies and laws here in Florida. St. Augustine doesn't have any specific laws or policies that pertain to the city itself. However, an extension of Florida's laws and regulations apply here in St. Augustine. Because there are no laws and policies that correlate directly with St. Augustine, Florida, this leaves St. Augustine vulnerable. Now you might ask, why is St. Augustine vulnerable? Well, St. Augustine's a small city, 1, and 2, everything that happens in the city must be paid for and funded by the city. So with things like storms, constant boat activity, constant dredging, and sea level rise all occurring simultaneously, St. Augustine's wetlands have been diminishing over time. Wetlands provide habitat for birds, fish, and other species. It also provides St. Augustine with protection from storms, sea level rise, and other activities of that nature. Nuisance flooding is only projected to get worse. With submersion adding to the loss in wetland area, we will see more environmental economic backlash. Costs associated with coastal erosion, flood repairs, living shoreline implications, population migration, and building collapse will all increase. With this being said, it is beneficial to both the environment as well as St. Augustine's economy to become educated on these two interconnected disciplines. Now, I want to shift our focus here to another part of the country that is actually very similar to St. Augustine, and that would be Louisiana. So, Louisiana and St. Augustine are very similar in the fact that they both share the same marsh grass, which is Spartina altimiflora. In Louisiana, they are experiencing much more severe wetland loss than we are here. And from a study done in the 1930s all the way up to 2000 here in Louisiana, they have experienced a rate of loss of 87 kilometers per year of wetland. Now, that is much more drastic than St. Augustine, but that is because Louisiana overall has a much more larger scale of wetlands than we do here. So in that time period from 1930s all the way to 2000, that has amounted to a total wetland loss in Louisiana of 25% of their wetlands. That is because Louisiana has a much larger scale of wetlands than we do. They have a greater area loss of wetlands than we do. So after experiencing all that wetland loss there in Louisiana, that has impacted cities like New Orleans, who are under sea level and have been prone to flooding for years. So with that being said, after 2005, Louisiana did implement flood walls and levees, which helps move around and circulate the water better than it ever has before. Now, I'd like to tell you all about what our wetlands provide for our economy, health, and livelihoods. Our wetlands provide many services to not only the environment, but our local and tourist population. Wetlands are nurseries and habitats for many of the species we consume as seafood. One example, local to the area, is Mayport shrimp. This shrimp species was once plentiful in St. Augustine. Now there is such a small population that commercial fishing for these shrimp has dissipated. I had a conversation with a local shrimper, whose name is Bill, who told me that this area 60 years ago had somewhere around 150 shrimp boats. and today there are only 4. The part of me that is a businessman focused on the loss of jobs and decrease in food supply and how that impacted our economy. As a coastal environmental scientist, I focused on the decrease in a local species population due to the habitat loss and overfishing. 2 sides of the same story that are unavoidably intertwined by a positive feedback loop. If the environment is healthy and providing services, it will benefit our local economy. But if the wetlands are decreasing, causing flooding, erosion, and decreasing accessible habitat, our economy and population will suffer the cost. We inevitably caused it in the first place.
Wetlands provide a vital natural habitat, especially for areas like St. Augustine located on the coast. It's important for the general public to be aware of the changes in our natural habitat that could be affecting us. Going into this project, I had little background knowledge on how to comprehend scientific writing and how to use scientific methods. I continuously learned throughout this entire semester, and I wanted to create a way to relay this information to the general public in a way that they could comprehend it and understand how it affects them personally. In order to relay this information, I took our scientific jargon and turned it into plain English. I did this through the use of Satori, an online interactive web page that walks the viewer through what wetlands are, how they are impacted by wetlands, as well as walking the viewer through our step-by-step and our results and findings.
This website is geared for all ages. It includes informational diagrams and videos that explain what a wetland is, as well as its importance to us in the ecosystem. This is an easy way for people to comprehend what is being discussed, enhancing their learning experience. Short quiz questions and matching activities are scattered through the page to keep the viewer engaged. These questions are not meant to be difficult, but rather a mechanism for knowledge absorption. Once the viewer has an understanding on the what and why for the research study, we go into the project and the step-by-step process. A simple explanation was then given for everything from hypothesis to the end results. All steps have interactive aspects and comment areas for questions or comments. This webpage serves as a bridge between the scientific community and the general public. It is an important tool for spreading our message and specific knowledge. Based on the results and discussion of our research, we suggest the following implementation strategies for wetland restoration and preservation. Number 1 is limiting boat wake near wetland sites number 2 and number 3, where wetland decrease seems to be happening on the wetland's outer edge where it meets the water. Number 2 is planting mangroves and grasses for regrowth. This will allow wetlands to naturally regrow and close off some of that fragmentation that we're seeing currently. Number 3 is limiting wetland filling for development. We can do this by increasing costs associated with filling or by increasing protected areas. And number 4 is communicating the risks associated with wetland loss and provide information on ways to limit impact. We'd like to extend a huge thanks to Dr. Cow, J.B. Miller, Tammy Barnes, and of course Professor Blonder for all their help during this research project. We could not have done it without them. And thank you to everyone who's watching this evening. We seriously cannot thank you enough.